Ever scroll through social media and see those perfect families? You know, the ones like where the smiling kids, amazing vacations, those perfect lives. It's kind of captivating, right? But lately, it feels like there's this growing feeling that maybe it's not all as perfect as it seems, especially when it comes to those kids who are, right in the spotlight. We're talking about those family vloggers and child influencers.
It's fascinating, isn't it? There's this inherent tension with these families between the image they're showing online and the reality that might be going on behind the scenes. I mean, we see those happy kids enjoying their, I guess, orchestrated adventures, but what's the cost? What about the psychology, the emotional impact of growing up with a camera constantly on you? And what about the ethics of it all, like profiting off your child's life, every tantrum, every happy moment turned into content? Those are the questions we're diving into today.
Okay, so let's break it down. I mean, we've all heard those stories about child actors, right? Struggling with fame, no privacy, trying to be normal. But child influencers, they face like a whole other set of issues. Think about it. Their stage is their home, their audience is the entire world, and their director is, well, mom and dad.
Exactly. And that's where it gets really messy, that blurring of lines between like family and this online personality. I mean, imagine a kid on a movie set, right? There are laws, unions, stuff to try and protect them, even if it's not perfect. But for these child influencers, it's all so murky. Their work is their life. It's hard to even tell what's a real family moment and what's, made for the internet.
So how do we even define exploitation when we're talking about family vlogging? Where's the line? When does sharing those fun times become, making money off your kid's life for those views and subscribers?
Yeah, that's the million-dollar question, isn't it? It's so gray. On one side, you have parents who are maybe just documenting their lives. They're sharing those milestones with family, friends, the world. And maybe some kids love the camera. They're natural performers. They like the attention. But then you have the other side, the potential for pressure, for parents manipulating situations, putting content before their child's feelings.
It's like the question all parents have now, right?
Yeah.
How much is too much when it comes to our kids on the internet? We're all trying to figure out those boundaries. But add in the money, the fame, the pressure to make that content, it just gets way more intense.
Right. And the potential consequences for these kids are huge. We're talking about real psychological impact. Think of the pressure to always perform, always look perfect, even if you're sad, mad, exhausted. Imagine knowing every time you mess up, have a bad day, show weakness, it could be recorded, edited, and shown to like millions of people.
It's like they're always self-conscious, always knowing they're being watched, judged, maybe even making money for someone. It's got to affect how they see themselves, how they connect with others,
Yeah.
their understanding of like what's private.
For sure. And we haven't even mentioned the harassment, the cyberbullying. Imagine being that young and having all those comments, good and bad, coming at you constantly. It's a breeding ground for anxiety, depression, and just messed up views on self-worth.
And the worst part is these kids, they don't get it. They're not emotionally ready. They can't think critically about what it all means, what it means to be so exposed. They're stuck in this world of their parents' ambitions, the pressure of society, that temptation of internet fame, and they can't even speak up for themselves.
Right. Which leads us to consent. Can a kid even understand what it means to consent to being on a family vlog, even if their parents say they're happy, excited? Developmentally, kids just don't get those long-term consequences. Their lives documented, shared forever. They don't grasp that their digital footprint sticks around, how they might be embarrassed, regret things, or even be put in danger later on.
It's like giving a kid, I don't know, a loaded gun without telling them how dangerous it is. They might think it's cool to hold, to play with, but they have no idea how to use it safely.
That's a great way to put it. And the consequences can be really bad. We've seen those former child influencers talking about feeling used, violated, robbed of their childhood, talking about the pressure to be on, the lack of privacy, never knowing who they are outside of that online persona.
And this isn't like one or two cases, right?
Mhm.
This is a trend. We're seeing more and more former child stars from TV, movies, and online saying we need to do better. More protection, rules, support for kids in the whole entertainment industry.
And people are starting to listen. We're seeing laws being proposed, trying to tackle the unique challenges of child influencers, trying to set rules for how long they can work, making sure they get paid fairly, protecting their education.
About time, right?
Hmm.
But laws aren't enough. We need a bigger change, a societal wake-up call. We have to understand how damaging it can be to make childhood into this product for the internet. We got to ask ourselves some tough questions about what we're watching, the platforms we're on, the values we're promoting.
100%. And we need to talk to our own kids, honestly,
Mm.
about the good and bad of online fame, the importance of privacy, the value of a childhood that isn't like constantly filmed and shared with everyone.
So how do we as viewers figure this all out? How do we make sure we're not part of the problem? How do we become smarter about what we're watching, more aware of the ethics of it all?
That's a big question. And it's something we're going to get into in the next part of our deep dive. We'll talk about the signs to watch out for, those red flags that tell you something might be wrong, and we'll discuss what we can all do to be more informed, more responsible about the content we consume. We'll also talk about, the bigger picture, the laws being made, and how we can all fight for these kids in this digital world. So we left off talking about how tricky this whole thing is, right? The ethics, the psychology of kids growing up online, especially with family vlogging, lots of gray areas. How do we as viewers start to see things more clearly? How can we spot when something might be wrong?
Yeah, it's interesting because we're all just so used to seeing so much content online, right? We just scroll, we share. We don't really stop to think about what's behind it all.
Yeah.
But with family vlogging, we got to be more critical. Where do we even start?
Well, one place to start is to pay attention to the parent dynamics in the family. Is it just one parent who's really pushing the channel? Is there one kid who's always on camera while the others aren't? Are the kids always playing the same role? The funny one, the troublemaker, the quiet one. It might be subtle, but it could mean that what the kids need or want isn't as important as making that content.
That makes sense. It's like looking deeper, right? Beyond those happy smiles and, those stage adventures. Are the kids actually happy, or are they just putting on a show? Are they being themselves, or are they being turned into characters to fit the story the parents are telling?
Right. Another thing to watch out for is when parents share too much, like using a kid's embarrassing moments, their meltdowns, their private struggles, just to be funny or get views. That's really damaging. It's like saying a kid's vulnerability is just something to exploit, something to use for likes and comments.
It's really crossing a line when parents are literally making money off their kids' worst moments.
Yeah.
And it's scary how, I don't know, the line between entertainment and exploitation has gotten so blurry. Yeah. It's almost like we're used to it now, seeing this kind of stuff all the time.
It's definitely a worrying trend, and it makes you think about what we value as a society, how we protect kids. Have we just gotten so used to everything being a product that we've forgotten that kids deserve respect, that their lives shouldn't be for sale just to make someone famous or rich?
Yeah, those are some heavy questions, and we can't solve everything, right? But we can be smarter about what we watch if something feels wrong. If a kid seems uncomfortable, if it just seems like the parents are taking advantage, trust your gut, don't like it, don't share it, maybe even unfollow that channel. Our views matter, right? We're kind of voting with every click so we can choose to support those creators who are actually putting those kids first, not just the money or the fame.
Absolutely. And don't be afraid to say something. If you see something really worrying, report it to the platform, to child protection services, talk about it online. It might seem small, but it could make a huge difference for a kid who's being hurt. Remember, staying quiet just lets bad things continue. Speaking up can actually protect someone.
It's easy to feel overwhelmed, what can one person do? But you're right, every voice adds up. And when we all do something, it can create real change. So let's talk about what that change could look like. What can we actually do to make things better for these child influencers?
Well, when it comes to laws, we need to push for those laws to see these kids as actual workers, just like child actors. That means rules about how many hours they can work, making sure they get paid fairly, making sure their education isn't neglected. We got to close those gaps that let people take advantage of kids online.
It seems so obvious, right? Protecting kids, paying them fairly for their work, putting their education and well-being first. But I bet there are people who don't want these laws, right? Especially those who are benefiting from the way things are now.
Oh, yeah, there's definitely pushback. Some people say these laws will, kill creativity, that they'll be too hard to enforce, that it's interfering with how parents raise their kids. But at the end of the day, it has to be about the kids. If it means setting some rules, making sure things are fair, and that someone's watching out for these kids, then that's what we have to do.
It's a balancing act, I guess. Supporting those creative families, but also protecting those kids. Laws are important, but it's not the whole solution. What about the platforms themselves, like YouTube, Instagram, TikTok? They're making money off this too, right? What's their responsibility?
Huge responsibility. They're the ones hosting this content, so it's on them to make sure it's safe for kids. That means being tougher on what content is allowed, shutting down those accounts that are hurting kids, giving families more resources and support. They got to be held accountable for making the internet safer for these kids.
So it's not enough to just react when something bad happens. They have to actually prevent it, protect kids from the start.
Exactly. They need to understand the risks these kids face and do something about it. I mean, think about it. They could have age verification, so kids aren't making accounts when they're too young. They could have rules about what content with kids can make money. They could educate parents about the dangers and like best practices.
Yeah, those are all good ideas.
Yeah.
But in the end, it comes down to each of us, right? Parents and viewers. We all have to protect these kids.
100%. Parents who put their kids online, they have to put those kids first. Set boundaries, limit how much time they're on camera, make sure school is still the priority, and talk to them about what's going on. And they got to let those kids make choices, say no, and speak up for themselves.
And what about us, the people watching? How can we be more responsible?
Pay attention to what you're watching. Support those creators who are doing things right, who are putting the kids first, not the money or the views. Look for those warning signs, like are the parents controlling everything? Are they sharing too much? Are the kids uncomfortable? And if something seems off, don't just ignore it. Report it to the platform, call child protection services, talk about it online.
So we need to change how we see these kids, right?
Right.
They're not products. They're children. And they deserve to be safe, respected, and we have to protect them.
Absolutely. And every little bit helps. Talking about it, demanding change, supporting those groups fighting for these kids, making good choices about what we watch, all of it adds up. We can make the internet a safer place for kids together.
Now, before we move on to like the last part of our deep dive where we'll talk about some solutions and how we can all be better about what we watch online, I want to bring up something we haven't really talked about. Money.
Oh, yeah, good point. We talked about the ethics, the psychology, but the money part adds a whole other layer. It's like, who's really profiting here? Are those kids getting their fair share? And is that money being managed well so they'll actually have something when they grow up?
Those are questions for everyone, right?
Mhm.
Parents, the platforms, lawmakers, they got to figure it out as this whole thing keeps growing. But for our listeners, the people watching, what should they be thinking about when it comes to like the money side of child influencing?
Well, think about the products they're selling. Are they for kids? Are they actually good for kids or just a way to make money? And watch out for like too much selling. Is everything about their life for sale? Are the kids being pushed to sell all the time? That could mean the focus isn't on family anymore. It's just about the money. And those kids are basically little salespeople.
It's all about balance, I guess. Sharing your family, but not exploiting your kids. And that line gets really blurry when money's involved. But hopefully, by understanding these issues, asking the right questions, and supporting the right creators, we can make the internet a little safer, a little more ethical for these kids.
Exactly. It's all about changing how we think. Seeing those child influencers not as products, but as kids. Kids who need us to protect them, respect them, and put their well-being first. Always.
So we spent a lot of time like really digging into this whole family vlogging thing, the good, the bad, the complicated. It's clear there's a lot to think about ethically, psychologically, especially when you add in the money part. But what's actually being done? Are there any solutions out there?
Well, the good news is it feels like things are moving from just talking about the problem to actually doing something.
Hmm.
More people are speaking up for these child influencers, pushing for laws and changes within the industry itself.
Let's start with the laws. What kind of laws are we talking about, and what could they actually change?
A bunch of states are looking at laws specifically for child influencers, which is new. They want to set rules for how long they can work, make sure they get paid fairly, and that their education isn't forgotten. It's about closing those loopholes, those gaps that let people exploit these kids online, trying to make it more like those child labor laws we already have.
So it's about recognizing that even though they're working from home and their parents are, like the Dosses, they're still child workers.
Exactly. That's a huge shift. For so long, people saw this as just cute family fun, but a lot of these kids are making serious money, and they deserve the same protections as any other kid working in entertainment.
It seems obvious, doesn't it? Protect the kids, pay them fairly, make sure they're going to school, that their well-being comes first. But I'm guessing not everyone's happy about these laws, right? Especially those who are making money off the way things are now.
Oh, there's definitely pushback. Some are saying these laws will, stifle creativity, be impossible to enforce, that it's stepping on parents' toes. but it has to be about the kids. Rules, oversight, accountability, it's all necessary if it means keeping these kids safe.
Finding that middle ground, right?
Yeah.
Supporting creative families, but protecting those kids. But laws are only part of it. What about those platforms? YouTube, Instagram, TikTok, all of them. What are they doing to make sure these child influencers are safe?
They have a big role to play, no doubt. I mean, they're the ones making money off this content too, right? So they're ethically obligated to make their platform safer for these kids. That means getting serious about what content they allow, banning those accounts that are harmful, and giving those families more support and resources.
So it's not enough to just react when something bad happens.
Mm.
They have to be proactive, stop these problems before they start.
Exactly. They got to step up and recognize how vulnerable these kids are and actually do something to protect them. I mean, think about it. Age verification to keep kids off these platforms if they're too young. Rules about what content with kids can be monetized, giving parents real information about the risks and how to do this right.
Those are all good steps, but ultimately it's on each of us, isn't it? Parents and viewers. We have to be the ones protecting those kids in this online world.
100%. Parents who decide to do this, they got to put their kids first, no question. Set boundaries, limit that screen time, make sure school comes first, and be open and honest with their kids about what's going on. And they need to give those kids a voice. Let them say no. Let them speak up for themselves.
And what about us, the people watching? What can we actually do to make sure we're not part of the problem?
Be careful about what you watch. Support those creators who are doing it right, putting the kids first, not just chasing those views and dollars. Watch for those warning signs. Are the parents controlling everything? Are they sharing too much personal stuff? Do the kids look unhappy? And if you see something that just feels wrong, don't ignore it. Report it, call someone, talk about it.
So we have to change how we think about these kids, right? They're not products, they're kids. And they deserve our protection, our respect, and we have to stand up for them.
That's exactly it. And it all matters. Talking about it, pushing for change, supporting those organizations out there fighting for these kids, being careful about what we watch, all those things add up. We can make a real difference together, make the internet safer for kids.
This has been, I don't know, really eye-opening. We talked about so much, all the ins and outs of this family vlogging world,
Oh,
the
yeah.
good, the bad, the potential for harm, the impact on these kids, the money, the laws, and what we can all do.
Mm.
It's a lot.
It's a tough topic, for sure. No easy answers. But by talking about it, being honest, working together for change, we can at least try to make sure kids are safe and protected online and in the real world.
Thanks for joining us for this deep dive.
Mm.
And remember, it's on all of us to make sure that childhood stays, a time of wonder and fun, not about the pressures and dangers of being online. We got to protect those kids.